Something shifted in their body when they finally understood you're not waiting anymore. Maybe they saw you with someone new. Maybe mutual friend mentioned you're thriving. Maybe your social media shows life so full and vibrant, it's clear you've built something extraordinary without them. Or maybe it's just the quality of your silence. Months of it now, unbroken, unshakable. The kind of silence that doesn't feel strategic, but final. However they discovered it, they know now. You've moved on. Actually moved on. Not the performance of moving on designed to make them jealous. Not the hopeful claiming to be over them while secretly checking if they're checking on you. Real moving on. The kind where you're building life that doesn't reference them, doesn't organize around their absence, doesn't leave space for them to return to. And this knowledge that you're genuinely gone, genuinely done, genuinely living life where they're irrelevant, creates specific crisis in their psychology that produces predictable behavioral response. Because the avoidant can handle you being hurt, can handle you being angry, can handle you missing them desperately while they maintain defended distance. What they cannot handle is your genuine indifference, your actual moving on, your real thriving that proves you don't need them, and maybe never needed them the way their ego required believing you did. The crisis this creates isn't rational. Their patterns pushed you away. Their behavior made moving on necessary. Their choices created the conditions where your moving on was inevitable outcome. But the avoidance defensive system doesn't operate on logic. It operates on ego protection and control maintenance, and unconscious assumptions about always being able to restore access to people they've pushed away. Your moving on destroys all of that, and the destruction produces specific sequence of behaviors that are so predictable you can almost set your watch by them. Understanding what they'll do next and why they'll do it protects you from mistaking their crisis-driven behavior for genuine transformation, or from letting their predictable attempts to restore access pull you back into dynamic that already proved it doesn't serve you. The first thing they'll do, test whether your moving on is real through carefully calculated contact. The avoidant's first response to sensing you've moved on isn't immediate dramatic gesture. It's subtle testing to confirm whether what they're sensing is accurate and whether your boundaries are actually as solid as they appear. They'll reach out with something casual and seemingly innocent, designed to appear like friendly contact, while actually testing if you'll respond warmly enough to indicate you're still accessible. The first move is usually breadcrumb, casual message that seems innocent. How are you doing? Saw this and thought of you. Random question about something from when you were together. The message is carefully constructed to seem like it's not really about them wanting you back, just friendly reaching out, just casual connection, nothing intense or demanding. This carefully casual quality is intentional. If they came in too strong, too needy, too obviously trying to restore romantic connection, they'd be revealing their hand, showing vulnerability, creating situation where you could definitively reject them. The casual approach protects them from that. If you don't respond, or respond coldly, they can tell themselves it was just casual message that didn't mean anything anyway. But the casual message is actually testing whether you'll respond, testing the warmth level of your response if you do respond, testing if the moving on they're sensing is real, or if you're still emotionally available to them despite appearing to have moved on. Watch for this. The casual, innocent-seeming contact after months of silence is never actually casual. It's reconnaissance mission designed to gather information about your current emotional state toward them without requiring them to be vulnerable about wanting that information. They'll watch your response time and tone obsessively, analyzing every detail for signs you still care, or confirmation you're genuinely indifferent. If you respond at all, they're analyzing everything. How long did it take you to respond? Immediate response suggests you're still checking for their messages, still hoping for contact, still emotionally available. Delayed response or no response suggests genuine moving on. What's the tone? Warm and friendly suggests door is still cracked. Cold and boundaried suggests door is locked. Did you ask questions back, suggesting interest in their life? Or did you give minimal response that doesn't invite continued conversation? Every detail is data. Every word is analyzed for evidence of whether you're actually moved on or whether there's still emotional engagement they could work with. This obsessive analysis is them trying to assess whether attempting to reconnect is worth the vulnerability it would require. If your response suggests you're still emotionally available, they'll proceed to next phase. If your response confirms you're genuinely indifferent, they'll likely retreat temporarily while experiencing crisis about the confirmation that you're actually gone. No response at all creates the crisis that leads to next escalation because silence confirms what they feared and forces them into more desperate strategies. The worst outcome for them is no response, not cold response, no response, because no response means you're so moved on that their reaching out doesn't even warrant acknowledgement, means they're so irrelevant to your life that responding feels like more energy than they're worth, means the moving on is real enough that even breadcrumb designed to test your availability gets ignored completely. This no response creates crisis, confirms their fear, proves you're actually done. And the confirmation, rather than making them accept reality and move on themselves, typically escalates their behavior. Because the avoidant who's realized you've moved on isn't operating from rational place. They're operating from ego crisis combined with panic about permanent loss. The no response to initial test usually produces either temporary retreat while they process the confirmation or immediate escalation to more obvious attempts to get your attention. Either way, the no response is what they feared most and what often triggers the more desperate behaviors that follow. The second phase. They'll attempt to make themselves visible in your life without direct vulnerable contact. When subtle testing confirms you've moved on, the avoidant typically moves to indirect visibility strategies, trying to remind you they exist without the vulnerability of direct reaching out. They'll increase social media activity in ways designed to catch your attention, posting things they know you'd be interested in or that reference your shared history. Suddenly, their social media becomes more active, posting things they never posted before, things they know you care about, things that reference places you went together, or jokes you shared, or interests you had. The content is designed to make you think of them, to create, I wonder if they're posting this for me to see thoughts, to generate curiosity about whether they're trying to send you message through their posts. This increased strategic posting is an attempt to make themselves present in your awareness without the vulnerability of direct contact. If you're viewing their content, if you're thinking about them, if you're wondering about the intentions behind their posts, they're succeeding at remaining relevant in your mental space, even if they're not in your life. Watch for this pattern. The sudden social media activity that seems designed to catch your attention after a period of silence or minimal posting is rarely coincidental. It's a calculated attempt to restore their presence in your awareness without requiring them to be vulnerable about wanting that presence restored. They'll engineer accidental encounters or show up in spaces they know you frequent, creating opportunities for organic interaction that feels less vulnerable than planned reaching out. If you have shared spaces, gym, coffee shop, social venues, they'll start appearing there more frequently, not in obviously stalking way, in a way that seems coincidental. Oh, I didn't know you'd be here. What a surprise running into you. The encounters are engineered to seem accidental, but are actually calculated to create face-to-face interaction that feels more organic and less vulnerable than direct reaching out would be. Face-to-face, they can gauge your reaction to seeing them, can test if you seem happy to see them or uncomfortable, can attempt casual conversation that might reveal whether you're actually as moved on as they fear. The accidental encounters give them information and create interaction without requiring the vulnerability of admitting they're seeking interaction. If you notice them appearing in your spaces more frequently, after a period of absence, recognize it likely isn't coincidence. It's strategy to restore access through engineered organic contact. They'll use mutual friends as information sources and as indirect communication channels, both to learn about you and to ensure you hear about them. Mutual friends become tools. They'll ask friends about you. How's she doing? Is she seeing anyone? Does she ever mention me? The questions seem casual, but they're intelligence gathering. They need to know what your actual state is. Are you as moved on as you appear? Is there a new person? Do you think about them, or have you completely moved past them? Simultaneously, they'll make sure mutual friends have information about them to pass to you. They're doing well, or they're struggling, or they've been thinking about the relationship, or they've changed in specific ways. Whatever narrative serves their purpose of remaining relevant in your awareness gets communicated to mutual friends with expectation or hope those friends will mention it to you. The mutual friends become unwitting communication channel that allows Avoidant to get information and send messages without direct, vulnerable contact. Watch for this. If mutual friends suddenly have a lot of information about the Avoidant to share with you, it's likely because the Avoidant is using those friends as conduits. The third phase. When indirect strategies fail, they'll make direct vulnerable contact. But the vulnerability is crisis-driven, not transformation. If you don't respond to subtle tests and indirect visibility, if it becomes undeniable that you've genuinely moved on, the Avoidant typically escalates to direct vulnerable contact. But understanding what's driving this contact is crucial. They'll reach out with confession of feelings, acknowledging they miss you, made mistakes, want another chance, using emotional honesty they withheld during relationship. The escalation is usually emotional honesty, message or call that's no longer casual or indirect. Direct statement of feelings. I miss you. I made mistakes. I understand what I lost. I want another chance. This emotional honesty feels significant because it's exactly what you wanted during relationship and never got. During relationship, they were defended, unavailable, unable to express feelings clearly. Now suddenly, they're emotionally honest, vulnerable, expressing exactly what you wanted to hear. This shift from defended to vulnerable seems like transformation. Seems like they've finally developed capacity they lacked. But the vulnerability is crisis-driven. It's produced by panic about losing you permanently, not by therapeutic work that develops sustainable capacity for vulnerability. Crisis-driven vulnerability is intense and genuine in the moment, but doesn't sustain once crisis passes. It's not evidence of transformation. It's evidence of desperation. They're being vulnerable now because they're in crisis. Once crisis is resolved, once you take them back, once they feel secure again, the defended patterns will return because the patterns are driven by nervous system programming that crisis doesn't reprogram. The apology will be specific and seemingly insightful, naming patterns, acknowledging impact, promising change in ways that sound like genuine breakthrough. Along with vulnerable feelings often comes specific apology. Not vague, I'm sorry if I hurt you, but specific acknowledgement. I see how my withdrawal pattern hurt you. I understand my emotional unavailability made you feel alone, even when we were together. I recognize I prioritize my defensive comfort over your legitimate needs. This specificity seems like breakthrough. Seems like they finally get it. Seems like the understanding that could change everything. And this is most dangerous moment, because specific, insightful apology is compelling. Makes you think they've done self-reflection work. Makes you believe they understand what went wrong in ways that would prevent them from repeating same patterns. But insight isn't capacity. They can perfectly articulate their patterns and still have those patterns, because patterns are automatic nervous system responses that require sustained therapeutic work to change, not just crisis-driven insight about what the patterns are. The specific apology is often them articulating things you told them during relationship, reflecting back your own words about their patterns. This isn't them having done independent psychological work. It's them finally hearing what you were saying all along, because crisis of losing you made them receptive to information they defended against when you were saying it. The apology is real, the insight is genuine, and neither is evidence of transformed capacity. They'll make promises about being different, describing specific changes they'll make, often with timeline and commitments that sound concrete. The vulnerable contact usually includes promises, specific concrete promises. I'll start therapy immediately. I'll work on being more emotionally available. I'll communicate when I feel like withdrawing instead of just disappearing. I'll show up consistently. The promises are specific and include commitments that sound real. Might name specific therapists they've researched. Might give timeline for when they'll demonstrate change behavior. Might outline concrete actions they'll take to prove they're different. These concrete promises are designed to overcome your skepticism, to show this isn't vague commitment but specific plan, to demonstrate they're serious about change because they've thought through details of how change will occur. But promises are cheap, especially crisis-driven promises from someone desperate to prevent losing you. The real question isn't whether they can make specific sounding promises. It's whether they've actually done any of the work before reaching out, or whether they're promising to do work in exchange for you, giving them another chance. Promises made during crisis to prevent loss rarely translate to sustained behavior change after crisis passes and loss is prevented. If they've actually done sustained work, months of therapy, demonstrated changed responses to triggers in their current life, tangible evidence of transformation, they won't need to promise future change because they can point to current change. If they're promising future change without evidence of current work, they're asking you to accept their crisis-driven desire to change as substitute for actual transformation. The uncomfortable mirror. Turn. Why your need to know what they'll do next reveals your unfinished business. But stop and examine why you're reading this. Why you need to know what the avoidant will do next after they realize you've moved on. If you're genuinely moved on, if you're genuinely building life that doesn't include them, if you're genuinely thriving in ways that make their behavior irrelevant, why do you care what they'll do next? The fact that you need to predict their behavior, anticipate their contact, prepare for their attempts to restore access. This reveals you're not as moved on as you're performing. Because truly moved on means you don't care what they do next. Don't need to prepare for their contact. Don't think about their behavior enough to want to predict it. You're oriented toward your own building, not toward their potential attempts to interrupt that building. Your need to know what they'll do next is evidence you're still partially oriented toward them, still organizing some emotional energy around their potential behavior, still invested in their response to your moving on in ways that suggest you haven't actually moved on as completely as you want to believe. This isn't judgment. It's observation that might serve your continued healing. If you're still tracking their potential next moves, you're not fully free of them. True freedom means you're too busy building to care what their next move might be, too fulfilled to need to anticipate their behavior, too far forward to look back and prepare for their attempts to pull you backward. Stop needing to know what they'll do next. Stop preparing for their contact. Stop organizing any part of your mental or emotional space around predicting their behavior. Let whatever they do next happen without your preparation or your anticipation or your mental energy being spent on it. That's when you'll actually be moved on, not when you can predict what they'll do next, when you don't care enough to predict it. The fourth phase, if you don't respond to vulnerability, they'll either escalate to grand gesture or retreat into defensive anger. When direct vulnerable contact doesn't produce desired response, the avoidant typically moves to one of two extremes: dramatic escalation or defensive retreat that blames you for their pain. Some avoidants escalate to grand gesture, showing up unannounced, writing long letter detailing everything they understand, making public declaration of feelings. The escalation path is dramatic gesture, showing up at your door unannounced, writing pages-long letter or email, cataloging everything they've learned, everything they understand, everything they regret, making some public declaration, posting about losing you, telling mutual friends they're trying to win you back, creating scenario where their vulnerability and desire for you is visible not just to you, but to wider audience. The grand gesture is designed to overwhelm your boundaries through intensity and public commitment. Hard to ignore someone showing up at your door. Hard to dismiss letter that took obvious time and emotional labor to write. Hard to maintain boundaries when they're making their desire for you public in ways that create social pressure for you to respond. The grand gesture is last-ditch attempt to break through your moving on by making their desire so visible and so intense that ignoring it feels cruel or impossible. But grand gesture is manipulation, not always conscious manipulation, sometimes desperate manipulation driven by genuine pain, but manipulation nonetheless. Its attempt to use intensity and public visibility and your own empathy against your boundaries. If someone respected your moving on, they wouldn't make grand gesture designed to override it. They'd accept your choice. The grand gesture is refusal to accept your choice, packaged in romantic intensity, designed to make refusal seem cold-hearted. Others retreat into defensive anger. Suddenly, you're the problem for giving up too easily, not trying hard enough, being unable to forgive or unwilling to see their growth. The other path is defensive retreat into anger. When vulnerable contact doesn't work, when you maintain boundaries despite their promises, when you don't respond to grand gesture if they made one, they often flip into anger. Suddenly, you're the problem. You gave up too easily. You didn't fight for the relationship. You're not seeing the growth they're demonstrating. You're being too harsh, too unforgiving, too focused on the past instead of recognizing they're different now. The anger is their ego protecting itself from the pain of rejection by making the rejection your failure rather than consequence of their patterns. If you're the one who gave up, who didn't try hard enough, who's being unreasonably unforgiving, then they don't have to sit with the reality that they destroyed relationship through their own patterns, and you're enforcing appropriate boundaries by not accepting them back. The anger lets them avoid accountability by placing responsibility on you. And the anger serves to restore their defended position. If they're angry at you for not accepting them back, they're no longer a vulnerable person hoping for another chance. They're a defended person who's above your refusal to recognize their growth. The defensive anger is ego protection mechanism activated when vulnerability didn't produce desired outcome. Either response is attempt to restore control over a situation where they've lost control, and both responses confirm they're not ready for healthy relationship. Whether they escalate to grand gesture or retreat into defensive anger, both responses reveal they're not ready. Not ready because they're still trying to control outcome rather than accepting your autonomy. Not ready because they're using intensity or blame to override your boundaries rather than respecting those boundaries. Not ready because they're focused on getting you back rather than on doing sustained work that would make them capable of being in healthy relationship regardless of whether you return. Someone who's genuinely transformed doesn't escalate to grand gesture when boundaries are maintained. They respect boundaries because respecting boundaries is what healthy relating requires. Someone who's genuinely done the work doesn't retreat into defensive anger when their vulnerability isn't reciprocated. They accept that you have right to choose yourself regardless of their growth. Both responses, escalation and defensive retreat, are evidence that their focus is on restoring access to you rather than on becoming a person who's ready for healthy relationship. And that focus confirms they're not ready. The fifth phase, eventually, they'll either give up and genuinely move on, or they'll cycle through these phases repeatedly. Long-term, the avoidant who's realized you've moved on typically lands in one of two stable states: genuine acceptance and moving forward, or chronic cycling through attempts to restore access. Some genuinely accept you're moving on and use the loss as motivation for therapeutic work that transforms them, but the transformation benefits their future, not your present. Rare outcome, but it happens. They accept you're gone, accept their patterns cost them someone valuable. Use the pain as sustained motivation for genuine therapeutic work. Get into therapy with attachment specialist. Do the work consistently for months or years. Reprogram nervous system responses. Develop new capacity. Transform into person who's actually capable of healthy relationship. This outcome is growth outcome, and it's outcome that doesn't involve you. Because if they're genuinely doing the work, they're doing it for themselves and for their future, not as strategy to get you back. They recognize that you've moved on, and they respect that. They do the work to become a better person who won't repeat patterns in future relationships. The transformation benefits them and benefits their future partners. It doesn't benefit you because you're not waiting for them to transform. You've moved on. And their transformation, if it occurs, is just interesting fact about someone who learned from losing you, but learned too late to benefit from having you. If you hear they're doing genuine therapeutic work, that's good for them. It's irrelevant to your life that doesn't include them. Others never fully accept it, cycling through periods of reaching out and retreating, unable to move forward, but also unable to let go of hope. You'll eventually return. More common outcome is chronic cycling. They try to contact you. You maintain boundaries. They retreat. Time passes. They try again with different strategy. Boundaries hold. They retreat again. The cycle repeats. Months between attempts, sometimes years, but they never fully let go, never fully accept you're gone, always maintain some hope that timing will be right someday, that you'll change your mind, that their next attempt will be the one that works. This cycling is their unwillingness to accept reality, their ego's inability to tolerate permanent loss, their attachment to possibility rather than acceptance of actuality. And this cycling can continue indefinitely if you let it. Every time they reach out and you respond at all, even to say no, even to restate boundaries, you're confirming there's still channel of communication open. The cycling stops when you stop responding entirely. When the silence becomes so complete and sustained that even their attempts disappear into void with no acknowledgement. If they're cycling through attempts, the solution isn't explaining better boundaries. It's maintaining absolute silence that gives them nothing to work with, nothing to interpret as potential opening, nothing that confirms you're even aware of their attempts. What? Their behavior. After realizing you've moved on, actually reveals about the relationship and your worth. Everything the avoidant does after realizing you've moved on is data about what you meant to them and what you deserve going forward. Their desperate attempts to restore access prove you were always more valuable than they treated you, confirming leaving was right choice. If you were as insignificant as they made you feel during relationship, they wouldn't be desperately trying to restore access now. They wouldn't be going through phases of testing, visibility, vulnerability, grand gestures. They'd have moved on easily the way they made it seem they would when they were pushing you away. The desperation proves you were valuable. Always were valuable. They just couldn't recognize the value while possessing access to you, could only recognize it through losing you. This delayed recognition is validation. Confirms you were right about your worth, even when their behavior during relationship made you doubt it. And confirms that leaving someone who couldn't recognize your value while having you was right choice. You deserve real-time recognition. Deserve someone who sees your value while having access to it. Deserve partner who honors what you offer while you're offering it, rather than recognizing it only after it's withdrawn. The timing of their recognition, only after you've moved on, proves the problem was never your worth, but their incapacity to receive what you offered. They recognize it now, after you're gone, after you've moved on, after it's too late to matter. This timing is revealing. Your worth existed all along. Your value was constant. What changed isn't you becoming more valuable. What changed is circumstances making them capable of seeing value that was always there. They couldn't see it while you were available. They can see it now that you're unavailable. This proves the problem was never about you. Was never about your worth being insufficient. Was always about their capacity to recognize worth being limited by their defensive structure. You couldn't make them see your value while they had you, because defended system prevented them from seeing it. Losing you removed enough defense that value became visible. But value was always there. You were always worth what they're only now recognizing you were worth. This should eliminate any remaining doubt about whether you were enough. You were always enough. They just weren't capable of seeing it until it was too late to benefit from seeing it. Whatever they do next is irrelevant to your future, unless you let their behavior pull you back into dynamic that already proved it doesn't serve you. They'll do whatever they do next. Testing, visibility, vulnerability, grand gesture, anger, cycling. All of it is their process, their journey, their behavior, and none of it should affect your trajectory unless you let it. If you maintain boundaries, if you maintain silence, if you continue building life that doesn't include them, their behavior is just noise happening in distance. It might be loud noise, dramatic noise, persistent noise, but it's noise nonetheless. It only becomes relevant to your life if you give it relevance by responding, by engaging, by letting it pull you back into their orbit. Their behavior after realizing you've moved on is test. Not test they're intentionally giving you. Test that circumstances are giving you. Test of whether your moving on is real or performance. Test of whether your boundaries are solid or negotiable. Test of whether you're actually choosing yourself or just waiting for right moment to choose them again. Pass the test. Let their behavior happen without your response. Let their attempts meet with silence. Let their whole process unfold without your participation. That's when you'll prove to yourself that the moving on is real. Not when they finally stop trying, when you're so busy building that you don't even notice whether they're trying or not, because their behavior has become that irrelevant to life you're living. The final truth about what happens when the avoidant realizes you've moved on. They'll feel it, they'll panic, they'll test, they'll try to make themselves visible, they'll reach out vulnerably, they'll make promises, they might escalate to grand gesture, might retreat to defensive anger, might genuinely transform, might cycle through attempts for years. All of this might happen. All of this is their journey after realizing you've moved on. And here's the truth that matters more than predicting what they'll do. If you've genuinely moved on, what they do next shouldn't matter to you at all. Their feeling that you've moved on should be interesting distant fact, not emotionally charged current reality. Their attempts to restore access should meet with silence so complete they can't even confirm you're aware of the attempts. Their transformation, if it occurs, should be their journey that benefits their future, not hook that pulls you back into their present. You've moved on, actually moved on. The kind of moving on that doesn't require tracking what they'll do next, doesn't need to prepare for their contact, doesn't organize any emotional or mental energy around their potential behavior. You're building something extraordinary, something that doesn't reference them, something that makes their entire existence irrelevant to your joy. That's what moving on actually means. They can feel it or not feel it. They can respond or not respond. They can try to restore access or accept the loss. None of it affects you because you're already gone. Not physically absent, but psychologically absent. They don't exist in your world anymore in any way that matters. And existing in your world in ways that matter is the only thing that would make their next move relevant. Since they don't exist in ways that matter, their next moves are just weather in distant city you used to live in. Might be dramatic weather, might be persistent weather, but it's not your weather anymore. You're living in different city now, one where the sun is shining and you're building, and you're too busy being present in your own life to track what's happening in the life you left behind. That's freedom. That's real moving on. That's what they'll feel when they realize you're actually gone. And what they do with that feeling is their concern, not yours. You have extraordinary life to build. Build it. Live it. Let them do whatever they do next without your witness. You're too far forward to look back now. You're too far forward to look back now. Why the pattern of their behavior after you've moved on reveals the fundamental impossibility of what they're seeking. Understanding the sequence of behaviors the avoidant goes through after realizing you've moved on reveals something crucial about why reconciliation, even if they've transformed, can never restore what was lost. They're trying to restore relationship with person who no longer exists because the you who moved on is fundamentally different from the you they lost. Here's what they don't understand when they're going through their phases of testing and reaching out and making promises. The person they're trying to reconnect with doesn't exist anymore. You're not the same person who loved them during the relationship. That person was willing to accommodate their patterns, was patient with their limitations, was hopeful about their potential, had capacity to stay through their withdrawal cycles. That person is gone. The moving on process transformed you. You developed boundaries you didn't have before. You learned your worth through the pain of not being valued. You discovered your capacity to thrive without them. You built life that doesn't need them. The person you became through moving on is categorically different from the person you were while with them. And this person, the moved on you, cannot have the relationship with them that past you had, because moved on you has different standards, different boundaries, different understanding of what you will and won't accept. They're seeking to restore relationship with past you, but past you is gone, replaced by moved on you, who wouldn't accept the relationship they're offering, even if they've changed, because moved on you knows that life is better without them than life with them ever was. Even if they've genuinely transformed, the relationship can never be what it would have been if they transformed while you were together. Let's say, best case scenario happens. They actually do the sustained therapeutic work. They actually develop new capacity. They actually transform into person who's capable of healthy relationship. Even this best outcome doesn't restore what was lost. Because if they'd done this work while you were together, while your patience was available, while you were still the person who loved them, the transformation would have occurred in context of your support and would have strengthened the relationship. The transformed them and the patient, you would have built something together through the transformation process. But they didn't do the work then. They're doing it now, after you've moved on. Which means, if you were to reconnect with transform them, it wouldn't be building on foundation of relationship that survived transformation together. It would be starting over with person who transformed after losing you, which means you'd be rebuilding from scratch with someone whose transformation you didn't participate in and whose capacity is untested in actual relationship with you. Even best outcome, genuine transformation, can't restore what could have been built if transformation had occurred while you were still willing to build with them. The timing of their transformation makes it irrelevant to possibility of relationship with you, because the you who would have built with transforming them is gone, replaced by you who's already built without them. The relationship they're trying to restore never actually existed. It was always you accommodating their limitations while they took your accommodation for granted. Additionally, the relationship they're trying to restore is fantasy. They remember relationship as something valuable they lost, but the actual relationship, the one that existed in reality rather than in their retrospective idealization, was you constantly accommodating their patterns while they took your accommodation for granted. Was you making yourself smaller while they stayed defended? Was you doing all the emotional labor while they maintained comfortable distance? That relationship wasn't good relationship worth restoring. That relationship was unsustainable dynamic, where you were being depleted while they were being comfortable. Now they've lost you. And in retrospect, the relationship looks valuable because they're comparing it to loneliness they're experiencing or to new relationships that fall short. But what they're remembering isn't the relationship as it was. They're remembering the benefits they received, your understanding, your patience, your love, while forgetting the cost those benefits had for you and the insufficiency of what they provided in return. When they try to restore the relationship, they're trying to restore dynamic, where they receive everything you gave while providing the insufficient response they provided before. Even if they promise to be different this time, what they're seeking to restore is fundamentally broken dynamic that never should have existed in the first place. You shouldn't want to restore it either. You should want something entirely different. Either transformed relationship built from scratch with genuinely changed person, which isn't restoration, but new creation, or relationship with someone else who doesn't require your accommodation to function in partnership. The permanent consequences they'll face, regardless of whether you return or stay gone. Whether you respond to their attempts or maintain your boundaries, the avoidant who's lost someone who moved on faces permanent consequences that will affect every relationship they have going forward. They'll never trust themselves to know when someone's actually done, creating permanent anxiety that anyone could leave at any time without warning they can recognize. You moved on in ways they didn't predict, enforced boundaries they didn't see coming, left when they thought you'd stay indefinitely. This failure of their prediction created permanent damage to their confidence in reading people. Now, in every future relationship, they'll have anxiety they didn't have before. Anxiety that person who seems committed could actually be done. That person who seems patient might have reached their limit. That relationship that seems stable could end without warning they'll recognize in time to prevent it. You taught them that their read on people can be catastrophically wrong, that people can have limits they're not advertising, that someone can be planning to leave while appearing to stay. This lesson creates permanent hypervigilance in all future relationships. They'll be watching for signs someone's pulling away, analyzing behavior for hints someone's done, unable to relax into security because you proved that security can be illusion that shatters without warning. This anxiety is permanent consequence of having lost someone they didn't see themselves losing. Every future person will be compared to what you gave them, and the comparison will make all future relationships feel insufficient. You set standard. You gave them everything. You provided understanding and patience and acceptance they won't find easily elsewhere. And now, every person they meet will be measured against this standard. This new person doesn't understand them the way you did. That person doesn't have your patience. Another person can't create the safety you created. The comparison is automatic, unconscious, permanent, and it makes every future relationship feel like downgrade from what they had with you. They destroyed the best relationship they'll probably have by destroying relationship with you. And knowing this, knowing they're settling for less than what they had, because what they had was destroyed through their own patterns, is consequence they'll carry into every future relationship. They'll never be fully present with new person, because part of them will always be comparing new person to you and finding new person wanting. This comparison creates permanent dissatisfaction that prevents them from fully investing in future relationships, because future relationships feel like consolation, prize, compared to relationship with you they destroyed. The shame of having hurt someone who moved on successfully will haunt their self-perception, proving to them that they're a person who destroys good things when they're offered. You didn't just leave. You thrived after leaving. You clearly became a better version of yourself without them than you were with them. This outcome proves something devastating to their self-concept. They weren't just insufficient partner. They were actively harmful presence in your life. You needed to escape them to thrive. This recognition creates permanent shame about who they are. They're not just person who made mistakes. They're person whose presence in someone's life was an obstacle to that person's flourishing. They're person who hurt someone who gave them everything, and that person had to leave them to become themselves. This shame about their fundamental impact on people who love them becomes permanent part of their self-concept, colors how they see themselves in all future relationships, creates fear that they'll hurt others the way they hurt you, generates anxiety about whether they're capable of being in relationship without being harmful to their partner. The shame is consequence that doesn't resolve, because what you proved through your thriving after leaving is objectively true. They were harmful to you, and you're better without them than you were with them. This truth becomes permanent weight they carry. Why the healthiest response to everything they'll do next is absolute silence that gives them nothing to work with. Regardless of what phase they're in, what strategy they're deploying, what promises they're making, the response that serves your continued freedom is the same. Complete silence that provides zero feedback. Every response, even boundary enforcement, gives them data and hope that continued attempts might eventually work. If you respond to their breadcrumb test with, "I've moved on, please don't contact me," you've given them data. You're still willing to respond. You're thinking about them enough to craft response. You're engaged enough to enforce boundaries. This data gives them hope. Hope that if they try a different approach, use different timing, say the right things, they might get different response. Every response feeds the hope that eventually some attempt will work, even angry response, even response that clearly states you're done. Any response is engagement. Any engagement is cracking the door. Any cracks suggest the door could potentially be opened wider with right approach. The only response that eliminates hope is no response. Complete silence. Their attempts disappearing into void with zero acknowledgement that you even received them. No data, no feedback, no engagement at all. This silence is what finally communicates. The door isn't cracked, it's sealed shut, and nothing you do is even reaching me because I'm so far gone, I don't respond to or acknowledge your existence in any form. Silence forces them to sit with uncertainty and eventually with reality, while any response keeps them oriented towards you and pursuing strategies to get different response. Response gives them certainty about where you are, what you're thinking, how you're feeling about them. Even negative certainty is better than uncertainty because certainty gives them something to work with. If you say you've moved on, they can try to prove you haven't fully moved on. If you say you're done, they can try to convince you to reconsider. If you say don't contact you, they can try to find the right words that would make contact welcome. But silence gives them nothing, just uncertainty. Uncertainty about whether you even saw their attempt. Uncertainty about what you think or feel. Uncertainty about whether there's any possibility or whether it's completely hopeless. The uncertainty is uncomfortable. Eventually, sustained uncertainty becomes unbearable. And unbearable uncertainty eventually forces acceptance of reality. They have to accept you're gone because silence over sufficient time with sufficient consistency proves it in ways that even explicit rejection doesn't prove it, because explicit rejection still involves your engagement. Let the silence force them to acceptance. Don't shortcut their process with responses that give them hope or data or engagement to work with. Your silence protects you from being pulled back in through any phase of their behavior. Test, visibility, vulnerability, grand gesture, anger, all of it fails against absolute silence. Each phase they go through is designed to generate response. Test generates response if you respond to breadcrumb. Visibility generates response if you react to their social media or engineered encounters. Vulnerability generates response if their emotional honesty makes you engage. Grand gesture generates response if intensity overwhelms your boundaries. Anger generates response if you defend yourself against their blame. Every phase is hook designed to catch you. Silence is refusing to be caught, refusing to respond to test, refusing to acknowledge visibility, refusing to engage with vulnerability, refusing to be overwhelmed by grand gesture, refusing to defend yourself against anger. The silence is armor that makes you impervious to every strategy they deploy. And maintaining silence requires discipline, requires you to not respond, even when they say the thing that would have made past you respond, requires you to let their vulnerability and their promises and their grand gestures happen without your witness, requires you to be so committed to your moving on that nothing they do tempts you into engagement. But this discipline is what protects you from being pulled backward into dynamic that doesn't serve you. The silence is your protection. Maintain it, regardless of what they do next. That's how you stay free. They'll do what they'll do. Test you. Try to make themselves visible. Reach out vulnerably. Make promises. Escalate or retreat. Transform or stay stuck. All of it is their journey, their process, their life, and none of it should intersect with yours because yours is happening in completely different space now. Space where they're not invited. Space where their behavior is irrelevant noise. Space where you're so busy being yourself and building life you love that their entire existence is background static. You don't even register as worth attention. That's real moving on. Not knowing what they'll do next and being prepared for it. Not even caring enough to know what they'll do next because you're too far forward to look back. They'll feel you've moved on. They'll do their predictable sequence of behaviors in response, and you'll continue building life so extraordinary that every phase of their response is just weather happening somewhere you're not. Let the weather happen. You're building in the sunshine. That's all that matters. That's the life they're feeling you've moved on should confirm you deserve. Claim it. Live it. Let them do whatever they do next without your witness or your response or your energy being spent on it. You're free. Stay free. That's the answer to everything they'll do next. Not engaging with it. Just being too far gone to be reached by any of it. That's power. That's your future. That's what moving on actually means.